Hi, my name's Neil. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you are all doing well. If you're a regular follower of my content, you'll know that I've been going back through 2023 and just kind of month by month making videos to take a look and reflect on what happened. This one is the final one of the year. Finally, it's taken a very long time to get through the amount of time it takes to film and edit and upload this stuff. So sticking to a schedule's been hard, but we're up to the December video, and so it's the last one of the year. If you saw my last video, you'll remember that epic slam where I was skating in the pool at XC and I just completely slipped out when getting on top of the coping in the deep end for a 50-50. Basically headfirst dived into the pool. If you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. When I was talking about that slam, I said there was another one coming up, and that one's in this video. So yeah, I was back at the XC skate park in Hemel Hempstead, trying to get used to that pool and trying to get my 50-50s in the deep end. I did it again. I had another massive slam. Now this time wasn't really down to my technique per se. It was, like I explained in the last video, is that those gaps in the coping blocks. And this one, I went up to do the 50-50, and as I put my front truck down, it planted perfectly in the little gap between the coping blocks, like square into that gap, and I just stopped dead and went straight over the front. And luckily my kind of movement direction was along the coping. So as I began to fly, I flew along the wall and just kind of got scooped up by the transition and slid down on my side, my elbow, everything on my side really, just slid to a halt. It kind of freaked me out somewhat when I was flying through the air, but I was completely unharmed. It was just another good example of how bad things can be when there are gaps in the coping blocks and you're doing some kind of stand-up trick. You can get just stopped dead in your tracks and thrown off the front. So let's check that out just for amusement's sake. There you go, and hopefully you can see kind of the moment. I've run it back slow motion now, and hopefully you can see at that moment where I put my front truck down and it just stopped dead. And I think somewhat the reason why it stopped so dead, you know, with my trucks, when they get ground down a lot, they get a very sharp edge where it grinds flat here. They get a very sharp edge here, and so that sharp edge, I think, hit into the coping block and just locked solid and went. Maybe if they were new trucks and that was rounded, it might have just skated over it, like glazed over the top. But because my trucks are so worn, I think that sharp edge just like dug in like a knife into the edge of the block and just stopped me dead in my tracks. That's a theory and I'm sticking with it. But yeah, it kind of happens. But it's another good example. You know, sometimes I put the front truck down a little bit heavy. When you do that and you put too much weight on the front, on your front foot, you know, there's a tendency to sort of tip forward as well. So there's probably a bit of that as well. So yeah, it was quite amusing that I just got up and walked away, but those are the kind of slams I can handle. And I just wasn't in the slightest bit hurt. So great. Perfect example as to why I always wear pads and a helmet. I don't feel uncomfortable or cumbersome or any of that. I skate better with all my pads on because I feel completely comfortable if I'm going to have some kind of slam. And it's also a good example of why, when you are skating bigger stuff, trying to keep in the mindset of staying against the wall. And, you know, if something happens, you fall into the wall and the wall just scoops you up. Can you imagine falling from the coping at that height straight down to the flat bottom? That would be insane. You know, that would just break bones and all sorts. So yeah, I feel comfortable that, you know, a round wall and a, you know, fairly round transition it kind of scoops you up if you just try and keep in the mindset of staying against the wall. So even when I bail things, I'm always thinking to get against the wall. You know, even if I'm flying in midair, I think about getting as close to the wall as possible, and you just get scooped up again, whether that be a knee slide or any other fall. So luckily I came away unscathed, and I'm glad about that. I hope that that's how all my slams go, really. But anyway, I didn't film that whole session. There was just a few clips that my friend was filming for me on his phone, and it just so happened to be that the epic slam got caught.
Here. Oh, come on.
But anyway, I survived, which was good, and we move on. As I mentioned in my last video, after this epic slam, I decided to take some epoxy putty with me on the next session, and I filled in that gap, and it's still there, still holding up, and I've been able to do more 50-50s there without that kind of scary epic slam of getting stuck in the coping blocks. So yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be down to me to repair the coping in that skate park, but I just don't think the people that run it pay any attention. People can complain to the staff that work behind the counter, but they just don't seem interested. They're just there to take people's money. So it's a shame, but I'm not going to complain too much, because I would rather have it there and try and fix it myself than not have the pool there at all, because we need places indoors in the winter time. So it is what it is. But anyway, we move on. Now, the next session that I filmed was at Better Extreme Skate Park in Barking. This is somewhere we go in the winter months. It's a little bit better because the lighting's great, and we can go there late at night when it's dark and wet and raining and all of that. So it's great for a winter refuge. There's a nice wooden bowl there and a mini ramp and various street bits and pieces that I don't skate, but it's enough to keep us going through the winter months. And mostly when I'm there, I skate the bowl, and this time around, I don't know how it came about, but a few of us started to try and just hop over the hip and land into a 50-50 along one of the flat walls. And It's not my kind of trick usually. I don't tend to go for hopping over hips. I haven't really sort of felt compelled to do so, but it's definitely a great thing to learn. So for my runs, I was dropping in on the deep end, going straight towards the hip and hopping up onto a 50-50 and just trying to hold it and get a bit of a grind and then go back in on that wall. And it's quite an interesting thing for something that I'd never even considered doing before. When you do something like that, you need to be leaning over enough to hold yourself into the 50-50, so leaning into the ramp more, but heading towards and hopping over the hip at great speed and then landing in a 50-50. Your kind of preservation mechanisms kick in, and you kind of want to back away from the edge because you're looking over the edge into the ramp. You sort of feel at odds with the protection mechanisms in your brain and what you actually need to do to get in. So for a lot of these attempts, I was kind of just rolling out onto the platform because I was just leaning back way too much and not leaning in and ducking in, ready to roll back in. So it was good exercise in just trying to get used to that. All right, that was pretty self-explanatory. I was kind of getting a few in the end, and yeah, it was an interesting thing to try out. After that, I retreated to the mini ramp and thought I would try and continue those frontside axle stalls, attempting to Smith stall kind of things that I was doing in the last video. So again, it's probably pretty boring to look at, but as I mentioned in the last video, what I'm really trying to do is lean back enough that I can have all my weight on the back axle and just hover the front enough to dip it down below the coping into Smith. The problem with trying that sort of thing on a very mellow or not steep mini ramp is that it's pretty hard to get your rail to hang on the coping without the wheels just hitting the surface. So really, eventually, it probably will be a whole lot easier to try and do these on something steeper, but something steeper means a bigger fear factor. So I at least feel like I've got to get the mechanics of the balance right on something shallow, even if it is harder in the long run. So that was pretty much everything I worked on in that session. Short and sweet, but you know, sometimes I just want to drill the same thing over and over again rather than just going through the motions of all the tricks that I can already do. All right, that's the end of part one for now. I don't want to leave the videos too long because I'm sure it'll just get boring and you'll just switch off. And these videos are probably way longer than perhaps they should be for anyone's attention span, but I'm not very good at cutting them down into tiny little chunks. So yeah, check back in for part two. Subscribe if you want to be notified when that's available. Hit the like button if you like the video. Leave us a comment below, all the usual stuff. I'll see you again soon for part two, where the whole year will be done. And of course, check out any of these videos here for more of the same kind of stuff. Thanks for watching.